She's our just like that. All right, well, maybe we will just get started and people can join us as they do. So I don't know if this is necessary, but I thought that I would begin by just speaking about the Office of the Treaty Commissioner and partnership with the Treaty Land Sharing Network. And what I've come to understand and appreciate about the Office of the Treaty Commissioner is that they've done an exceptionally good job at building partnerships with a wide variety of organizations in this province. And the Treaty Land Sharing Network can say with a lot of pride and joy that we get to be one of those great partners. And it's been a really important partnership for the Treaty Land Sharing Network. And in case anyone is new to knowing what the Treaty Land Sharing Network is, it is a network of farmers, ranchers, and people who hold title to land who agree to begin the crucial work of honoring treaties by sharing their land as treaty intended. And we are kind of upstarts. We are a counterpoint to the creation of the network was a counterpoint to the killing of Colton Boushie and the acquittal of Gerald Stanley, and an effort to try and say, you know, racism doesn't have to breed so well here in rural Saskatchewan. So in our short little history, we've been able to grow the network to currently around 18,000 acres among about 30 to 33 farm families or landholders. So it's emergent. It's not going to make the big difference yet, but again, the partnership with the Office of the Treaty Commissioner has been a very important part of it. So because we're small, I invite everyone to, before we get started with Erin, to introduce ourselves. And maybe I'll organize this so that Shade then introduces Erin, and then Erin carries on from there. So I'll get everybody else to introduce themselves, and then Shade to Erin. Does that work?
Yep.
All right. Then Dixie, why don't you tell us about your name and where you're at and your involvement in the Treaty Land Sharing Network.
All right. Well, I'm Dixie Green, and my land is the south and east of Swift Current. It's right on Duncairn Dam, which is a nice lake. And I joined the Treaty Network, Land
Sharing Network, yeah.
Land Sharing Network, that sounds better. This past year, and I've got it posted, the nice signs put up, and I'm waiting for my first visitor.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thanks, Dixie. Sandra and John?
There you go. We have farmland around Eyebrow. We've moved off the farm and our kids are farming now. I love the Treaty Land Sharing Network. It's been such a great experience. I've learned so much, and we're still waiting for visitors too. So I'm looking forward to that as well. Do you have anything, Dad?
I'll add that I think the signs, although I really like the colors, they don't stand out really well. The pastels, and the ones I got were probably too small. They look like I got the bigger ones, but when you put them back from the road, they're kind of small when you drive by. So,
all right, bit of feedback. We'll take that. Thank you.
Okay.
Nettie. Okay, there she comes. There she is.
Everybody, I'm Nettie Weeb. We farm south and west of Saskatoon and are looking forward to welcoming Treaty Land Sharing Network folks to our farm in June. I regret that I'm going to have to leave the meeting here at 7:30 to go to another meeting. So I'm sorry, but I'm pleased that you're going to record it so that I can hear it later.
That's great that you're here for as long as you can. Thanks, Nettie. Autumn.
Hi there, I'm Autumn from the Office of Treaty Commissioner. I work as a mentor in a mentorship with the Office of Treaty Commissioner under Treaty Education. I am from Thorn Trail First Nations, residing in Treaty 6 territory in Saskatoon. I am a land user. I do go out on land and hunt, so I'm excited to be able to use the network this summer, hopefully this fall. So hopefully I get to visit some of your guys' places. Yeah.
That's great. Thanks, Autumn. Valerie?
Hi everyone, I'm Val. I'm from Treaty 7 territory, where my parents and sister and brother-in-law are still farming and have land there. I live in Regina in Treaty 4 now, and I'm part of the coordinating committee of the Treaty Land Sharing Network.
Great. Thanks, Val. And Martha? Martha Jane?
Hi, I'm in Saskatoon at the moment. Nettie is my mom, so that farm is the farm that I grew up on. I'm one of the coordinators of the Treaty Land Sharing Network, and yeah, I'm really happy that Erin has agreed to talk to us. I'm sorry that it's a smaller turnout tonight, but I'm glad that we're recording because I think this is calving season and also a spring storm coming for those in the south. So that might be part of the reason why there's things happening for folks on their farms this evening. But yeah. What else was it? Was there another question for the prompt?
No.
That was it. Okay.
No, your
good.
involvement with the treaty. Great. Emily and then Shade.
Hi everyone, my name's Emily. I grew up in Saskatoon, Treaty 6. I live in Treaty 4 now in Regina. I'm on the coordinating committee of the Treaty Land Sharing Network and look forward to hearing from Erin tonight. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Emily. And Shade.
Hello, everybody. My name is, oops, my little boy here is in the background playing. My name is Shade Heimbecker. I'm with Office of the Treaty Commissioner as a student mentor under the mentorship program. Same with Autumn. I am from Muscatay First Nation, Treaty 6 territory, and I'm actually living in Saskatoon right now, which is also Treaty 6 territory. So I will introduce Erin here. So Erin Tootoosis is Plains Cree from the Poundmaker Indian Reserve in Treaty 6 territory. University and traditionally educated, he shares his expertise on current Indigenous issues through several speaking engagements throughout Saskatchewan and through his involvement with boards and committees. His ceremonial grounding guides him in how he communicates and builds relationships with people. A father of 3, he makes his home on the Standing Buffalo Dakota Nation in Treaty 4 territory with his wife of 22 years. So welcome, Erin. I'm excited to hear you speak today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Shade. You know, one of the first times Shade and I met, we never really met. We're acquaintances on an Indian residential school presentation with the Office of the Treaty Commissioner. I suddenly had to introduce her, and I didn't know how to say her name, and I was like so pressured. I'm like, I pronounced it Shaid, I think.
Lots of people pronounce my name like that when they first see it.
But I know it's Shade, so I never got to apologize for that. We were just boom, 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 right into everything there. So
that is okay. I get that a lot. You're not the first one. I'm just used to it by now.
So I'm glad to be here. I do have a lot of information to share. Part of my involvement with the Office of the Treaty Commissioner, I got shoulder tapped. I think it might have been 4 years now. And a lot of people knew I knew a lot about treaties and have a lot of stories, a lot of history. All of these things have come my way as a result of being at the right place at the right time. I was at the Treaty Land Sharing Network gathering that was at the Governance Center at the Treaty 4 building there, and we had the round table session there with everybody, even though there's no table, but we had a good day of getting to meet everybody and stuff like that. But I haven't been able to make any other ones, just due to work and other things. So But again, I'm here to kind of present on myths and misconceptions, and I picked 3, just dealing with general ones as we start introducing the topic and going into this sort of discussion regarding misconceptions. So we were kind of hoping there would be some more Indigenous folks, so that we could do a discussion on the misconceptions that Indigenous people may have about settlers, but it doesn't look like we have any. But that's not to say that I don't ever have a plan B. I have enough content to talk to people for a number of days even, and I do that often. Like I can do 3 days straight with one group, and have something different for them through those whole 3 days. So I did put a little PowerPoint together here real quick, and I'm just going to start that right now. So the virtual presentations have kind of been my thing here, especially with work at Sask Polytech, doing a lot of these for so many classes during our work at home period the last 2 years. But we've been here at on campus ever since September now, working in person. So, and I'm just so glad to be in person doing presentations and lectures and everything like that here on campus again. So I just need to be enabled as a co-host to share my screen.
There you go. I made you co-host there.
Still unable to share. It said the host disabled screen sharing.
Oh, there we go. Fixed it up. Sorry about that.
We got it. Oh no, it went away now. Okay, there we go.
Sorry about that.
So everybody should see that, right? So I do have a presentation that's just general of misconception, of misconceptions about treaties. But I took this one and I kind of introduced other topics. So there are so many myths and misconceptions out there that Indigenous peoples have, especially myself, because I am a hunter. I do hunt, and I do that. I'm kind of different, I think, from a lot of hunters in the way I do things. And, those that have come on hunting trips with me know I hunt different. I'm hunting for food. I'm not hunting for trophies or glory or anything like that. You'll never see any pictures of me hunting. So, but again, one of those misconceptions, again, but I like to start with this map in all my presentations, though. Like, it's just one of the maps that a lot of people probably never seen. They recognize it. It's a treaty map, but, we have this one area here. And that's not part of Treaty 4, 6, or 7. And a lot of people don't know, like, well, what's that about, right? And I like to talk about it because it's very significant in the way, and a lot of folks that we have here probably never really had this explained to them, right? Like, has anybody had that experience and explained to them? All right. So there were other maps that I've seen, and it was a map, I believe it was National Geographic, that had Indian treaties in one of these things. I could never find it again. I had the map on my wall when I was a kid. And they had this area here, if you see my mouse, my cursor on the screen, they had this piece mapped out like this. It was this big. And that was the first time I ever seen that. Like, must have been like maybe 12, 13 years old. I asked my dad, and I said, hey, how come this isn't like the other treaty maps that they show us in school? Like, this big piece of land is sticking out there. Why is that? So he told me that, long time ago, they made a treaty with our people here on this side, made a treaty with the Blackfoot. And they, and a part of that treaty was that land would be kind of off limits for anybody to claim because of what's in that area, you know, the Sand Hills and Cypress Hills. You never really told me much about that until I started. It just kind of, you know, stuck in like to the roof of my mouth, like if you eat deer ribs, like the grease that sticks on the roof of your mouth. It was always bothering me until I was able to start researching that. And then I discover, I'm sitting in a place and I hear this story of the Battle of Old Man River, or Belly River, outside of Lethbridge in 1870. You know, almost 400 Iron Alliance people died fighting against Blackfoot that day. And they, you know, they have the historical site outside Lethbridge there as well. But what took place after that was a treaty. And how our people are tied into that is like Chief Poundmaker. Before he was a chief, there was a rumor going around that he was Chief Crowfoot was hearing a rumor that there's this man amongst the Crees there that looks like his son that was lost fighting a battle in 1866 along the Battle River, where almost 400 or over 400 Blackfoot people were ambushed and killed that day fighting, leading to the establishment of this northern border after in a peace treaty. So this rumor became so strong that Crowfoot actually requested, after the Belly River, that requested scouts to go get this man, because he wanted, like, there was calls to make a peace treaty again, but he wanted this man to be the negotiator for the Crees and the Sotos and the Nakota peoples. So it was Chief Poundmaker that looked exactly like Chief Crowfoot's son. In the process, he was adopted, and this is how Poundmaker became known as the peacemaker in negotiating this treaty out in 1871, which was really a compromise for the Iron Alliance because they were on the losing end of things. But they had to agree to this, that the Great Sandhills and the Cypress Hills area would be kind of like an international peace area, which none of the nations there could lay claim to. So when it came to the numbered treaties, this eventually led into that land not being able to be claimed when the negotiators asked, where is your land? When they asked the nations there, they couldn't mark this in the geographical description that was given at the treaties as their land, as their country. All of these were acquired countries by those nations, and Treaty 4, Treaty 6 was the alliance, the Iron Alliance. Treaty 7 is the Blackfoot Confederacy, because you have the Piegan, the Blood, and the Siksika, when they're all different, and you have Southern Piegans in Montana, right? So, so that's just in a nutshell, a quick version of that story of what took place there. Why this eventually people forget about these things, and then we see maps today where Treaty 4, like this whole piece is just considered part of Treaty 4 today, without regard of those treaties that were made between indigenous nations being more powerful than these numbered treaties themselves, right? Because those are confederacies of nations coming together here on this territory, showing a pipe stem on each side. It goes pretty deep. So the significance of the Sandhills, though, to the Blackfoot people, when they lose a relative, when they pass away, they say, my relative has made their journey to the Sandhills. So it's kind of like their spirit, their spirit world, or their afterlife, their final resting place, where the spirits of their people go, is in the Sandhills. And all archaeological evidence that you'll find there is of Blackfoot origin. So over the years, you had the pipeline that went through there. A lot of bodies have been dug up that were Blackfoot origin and reburied in a top secret location outside of Wanuskewin Heritage Park. So there's a lot of stuff there. The ranchers that live in that area in the Great Sandhills on the Saskatchewan side have so many stories of so many things that have been uncovered when the dunes move, right? Such as a Blackfoot warrior that was buried upright on a horse, holding a spear. Like, you know, these wicked sights like that. If anybody has any questions or wants to chime in, like I don't mind if anybody just interrupts me. I really like that if people do that when I present, because sometimes I could go and go and go and go and go and not stop. So myths and misconceptions. There's one here like this one's personal and it's also one that I share with a lot of fellow hunters, is that, you know, we have this whole thing of having to ask for permission before we access land now today. If not, well, you know, we have the choice of getting charged and fined a big amount and our vehicles and guns taken away. And but the thing is just a simple answer of being told no. A lot of people will just avoid going to ask. But also we have that event that took place, right? That was mentioned at the beginning of the session here, you know, the murder of Colton Bushy from Red Pheasant. So there's also that fear of going to somebody's home to ask them permission. A lot of the places I go to hunt, there's no phone numbers posted, nothing's convenient. Meaning we'll actually have to drive up to somebody's yard dressed in our full camo and hunting gear, looking very tired, maybe mean, maybe some of us, like myself, I go out and I sleep in my vehicle and then you know, having to go ask for permission, you know, I'm pretty sure I get told no a lot of times, or get chased away. There's a lot of times I've gone to go pick sage also, and just around the Regina area, I've been asked to leave. Like, what are you doing here? And I'm saying like, well, I work at Sask Polytechnic. I'm picking sage, and they're like, well, you didn't ask us. You can't be here. You know, get the hell off our land, kind of thing, and all that. And we smudge a lot on the campus here, and students really depend on what we have here, because a lot of our Indigenous students don't even have access to that. They don't have access to relatives in their home communities that are just 20 minutes out. They don't know anybody. They've been so urbanized, but they're so just craving for anything culture. And when it's provided here, it brings them a sense of home. And then, you know, I have the responsibility of having to go out and pick the sage that we don't have growing pretty much on the reserve, or the reserves. And the other thing, I'm not from the reserves here either. So I also get hassled from people from the different reserves as well for going onto their land. So it's a really odd situation, but that's the one thing that we're just it's kind of a given almost, that, you know, an expectation of just being told no, and that we have to really just I don't know how to fix that. And you know, sometimes we're, like I mentioned, we're just chased off and are threatened, or, you know, driven at, chased by vehicles. A lot of times we're just walking in, and the biggest fear I have of you know, that I have is, you know, yeah, we get permission, we park our vehicle, But what if our vehicle gets vandalized next? And we're kind of stuck out in the middle of nowhere. So I do have stories of that. Some guys got their tires flattened. So that's any thoughts on that? Like,
I think thanks, Aaron. I think in one sense, I think that's one of the things that we're attempting to address through the Treaty Land Sharing Network. And I think John's feedback on the signs not being big enough or not being clear enough from the road is helpful. But yeah, but I think in some ways in some ways I think we're trying to address that. But I think in order for it to be like, our network would have to grow a lot for it to be spaces that are kind of connected across the province. And so I think we have a lot of work still to do to address that. But I would like to hear from you a little bit about how you think, how we could, or what other kind of things we could do in the network to make it more appealing or more accessible for Indigenous hunters or folks gathering, to make it clear that those spaces are spaces where, obviously where we're trying to honor treaty and inherent rights.
no, for sure. So a lot of us that do hunt, like we're really being restricted more and more and more to like wildlife areas, because it is still kind of considered crown land, right? So one of the things that we all use is this, I don't know if you can see it, but it's the iHunter app, like that's on, and all the wildlife zones areas are marked on there that allow for foot access, that have been purchased by the Saskatchewan Wildlife Federation. So those are all on this app here, and it's a really interactive GPS map, and you can zoom in and really like in real time, like it'll follow your vehicle around, like just like you're on an actual GPS, and you can navigate through the roads and everything like that, and get to these secluded places where there's actual huntable land on there, right? But it would be cool to get Treaty Land Sharing Network lands on there as well too. And this is really good, this pamphlet. I've distributed these at the U of R here at Sask Poly First Nations University. So I do know there's a lot of hunters there as well. So I've been distributing those off and on at the Indigenous student centers there and common gathering areas. So has anybody ever heard of iHunter app?
Nope.
It's not free though, it's by subscription though, but it's worth it.
We were contacted by the Sasklanders. So they were the group that won the $10,000 government grant to build an app for really helping the trespassing legislation come into be.
Right. That's
anyways,
new. I don't have that one yet, and I was excited to hear about that one.
Well, and what they really want, and I haven't done it yet, there's so many things I haven't done yet, but this is one of them, is to sign up our land as Treaty Land Sharing Network land here at Bladworth, just to give us a chance to see what that app was like. And I still need to do it, because I think it is important to see how we can make our land, the Treaty Land Sharing Network, even more visible for everybody.
Right. So, technological advancements are really, like a lot of our Indigenous hunters are that way now, and really advancing on using their phones while they're hunting, and coverage is way better out there as well. Like a lot of the places that I hunt now have full on LTE signals out there. So before they didn't, and this app like this was useless at a lot of zones. So
We have a few comments in the chat.
okay.
We have, hold on, sorry, I can't see it. Sandra Fuller asked, can I bring some sage when I come to Regina? That was Sandra Fuller. And then Sheila, or what was that?
For sure. I take it. We need lots.
And then Sheila asked, responded, it is my understanding that all community pastures can be accessed when the cattle are not there.
Yes, they can. And those are other, it's really up in the air now, but after this, the Trespassing Act and also with the cancellation of the PFRA program, the community pasture lands are actually being leased out to private owners. So lands that we did have access to under PFRA, which we considered them PFRA even years after they were, they're canceled out as PFRA lands, are now under private use and leases. So being restricted after 1930 to being only able to hunt on unoccupied crown land, those lands fell under that. And we used to hunt on those lands all around Palmaker as a kid. There was lots, but now you go there today and you can't. A lot of the Hutterites have a lot of the pastures there under lock and key. And kind of goes into my next one here too, that, Indigenous people can be sustained by their own land. And we're talking about reserve land. There's this misconception out there that I've heard personally, like people tell me, why don't you go hunt on your old land, on your own land, I mean. I'm just reading the chat here again. It was announced at a recent Wildlife Federation meeting that they're still accessible, although some will tell you that the lease would stop people. So again, that's also fits in with the misconceptions, right? Like we think because there's somebody that holds a lease there, but again, they have the gates padlocked and we can't get through there, right? Like, so another example of that, also like Indigenous people can be sustained by their own land. There was the introduction of, has anybody ever heard of the permit system?
Pass system?
Permit system.
Yeah.
So we often get that confused with the pass system because it's often bunched together in academic literature there that, they bunch them together, the pass and permit system. And often they focus just on the pass system where Indians couldn't leave their reserves, right? But the permit system was a big, huge package that a lot of people don't really understand or have been really informed on what all was included in that permit system. So because of that, I could go into that permit system later, but because of that introduction of the permit system in 1881, a lot of our people weren't allowed to really, I guess, farm and ranch in a sustainable fashion like everybody else was. We had to ask for permission in order to sell our cows and to sell our grains. And often the Indian agents were horrible people, or they were, requiring our women to prostitute themselves in order to receive rations. And it wasn't likely that a lot of our people were going to be given a permit to sell beef or sell grain. And because of that system, though, I don't want to go into too much details of it right now, but because of that, by 1918, all reserve lands were already just like all farmable and pasturable reserve lands were just sitting there, not being farmed, not being ranched. That's how bad that permit system was. It was just impossible to raise cattle now because we didn't have the lands to dedicate to haylands, and we were really relying on our partnerships with non-Indigenous farmers that we considered family and friends. That was cut off. So, and the permit system, it was so bad that the Indian agents wouldn't even let us kill our own cows to feed our own family. So, it was so bad that our people literally were just forced to watch their cattle starve to death. So a lot of instances, a lot of people just secretly gave their cattle away one by one, little at a time, so they wouldn't go noticed. But the Indian agents knew, and they knew what was going on, and they knew Indians were giving up, and that was the whole intent of the permit system. So what they amended the Indian Act again in 1918, and the superintendent of Indian Affairs was granted himself the power to put a white farmer and rancher on Indian reserve land that wasn't being farmed or ranched, and set him up with 99-year leases. So that was 1918. That was, just a little over 100 years ago. Some of those leases are just now expiring. Some are still in effect because it took place after 1918, after a few years there, where these leases were being put into place. So reserve land was being locked up to white farmers and white ranchers for 99 years. And a lot of the provincial regulations of farming and ranching don't apply on reserve. So they're able to use and experiment with just about anything on a reserve. It was like that for a long time. Our waters got polluted. Our medicines were sprayed, aerial sprayed. Our berries don't grow anymore. It's really rare to find berries on a reserve today. So we're picking off reserve. And also you had the pass system, right? Like that lasted from 1881 to 1951, where people weren't allowed to leave the reserves. So everything on the reserve was being, it was either starve or try get what's left on there. And you have passes of people leaving the reserve to go hunt gophers even. So people tell us, why don't you just go hunt on your own land? It hurts because, our own land, like Poundmaker, for instance, the pasture there now, because we've lost a lot of ranchers there. The only one that's still ranching is the chief and my uncle Kenny on Poundmaker. The pasture has been locked last year by the Hutterites from the local colony there. They came and put a padlock and chain on the fences into the pasture where we used to hunt. Now we can't even go there on our own reserve. So it's really it's really unsustainable there to live culturally almost, where food is medicine, right? And it's not only that, but it's I'm just reading the comments here regarding Jim Dashik too, and it is true that Dakota weren't they too were under the permit system though, because this was an Indian Act thing. It had nothing to do with treaty. So they too were put under the permit system here. My wife's uncle is one of the last that was actually engaged in farming on Standing Buffalo, but today all the land is leased out, and he has just a little section of land where he has some horses and a few cows left. So there's not that much land on Standing Buffalo that's really farmable or really ranchable. They do have a number of buffalo though. So, but to be sustained in our from a cultural sense though on a reserve, it's next to impossible today. which is why a lot of our people are hunting mostly off reserve. You know, we don't have elk on a lot of our reserves today, right? There's a few moose that come around. Deer, the habitats have been really disrupted by like farming practices that you know, have clear cutted a lot of livable habitat that sustained some whitetail and some mule deer. But all of those are always being threatened by more and more development for farming, as more and more land gets leased out today. So one reserve that's kind of taking it all back, though, you know, now that the leases are expiring, Cowasis First Nation, you might have seen them in the news, where they're trying to get their people back into farming, you know, back into using their own land for, you know, for a kind of a communal effort in farming and sustaining and developing their economy that way. So the medicine chest clause is the next one. And I know a lot of people probably haven't really heard how this came to be, right? Has anybody heard about the medicine chest clause? So when I mentioned food is medicine, we don't really think of that, but like a lot of our medicines, even the smudges that we use, to make them more powerful, we can blend them with certain animal parts to develop cures for certain ailments, like lung ailments. The smoke is medicine as well, that we use, from burning this medicine, we can breathe this in and we can cure pneumonia, bronchitis, you know, asthma. It's a treatment for asthma that we can use by blending a root and also the dried castor glands of beaver. Just as an example, through this pandemic, a lot of our people were using what we call skunk juice. It's the oil that's extracted from the scent glands of skunks. And that was actually, goes back to the Spanish flu of 1918. That's how our people survived. That was by utilizing ceremony for direction, for a cure for that disease, or for that virus that was going on. And it was a little skunk that came out of that ceremony. So there's ceremonies that we do that we can still go to for guidance there. This particular ceremony is referred to as the shaking tent. This happens in the dark, where the man that puts on the shake tent ceremony, his arms are tied behind his back, and he's put into this square covered, like there's willows, 4 willows that are covered into this little square. And it's in the dark, and when things get started there and the singing gets started, the lights and everything starts coming from the top of this tent, and you know, it shakes like this back and forth, like very violently almost. Meanwhile, the guy's just, you know, tied up, laying down on the bottom there. He's not the guy that's all of a sudden got flashlights and stuff and making all these lights and stuff. What happens is certain spirits come in there and they actually directly talk to people. During the Spanish flu, there was a little skunk spirit that came through and directed people how to make this medicine. When you go back to treaty, though, you go back to the days before Treaty 6. Alexander Morris was invited to one of these ceremonies. Alexander Morris wasn't a coward. He was a very strong-headed person that wasn't afraid of anything, and he agreed to it, and he came. See, I'll go. You know, I'm not afraid of these Indian ceremonies. I'll go check it out. So they invited him in there, and you know, back then they were in these lodges that were built kind of like a longhouse, and the tent was in the middle. A lot of people were there, a lot of like Big Bear, you know, all these big names were at that ceremony. And when it started and it took place, the spirits were called in. You've seen all this action happening in that ceremony. Then the spirits started directing. They used a translator to translate what the spirits were saying in our language. And the interpreter directed to Alexander Morris. He said, they placed something in front of you. They placed something in front of you, and you're to describe what it is to us. So he reached in front of him. He was feeling it, hey? He was feeling that. And then he said, this is like the leather bags that doctors carry. And then they said, yeah, good. You're to reach inside there now and describe everything in that inside there. So he opened it up. You can hear clanging and metal stuff, and he's describing all the tools there that doctors use, and the scalpels and little vials like glass jars and stuff, like there's medicines and stuff in there. He described all of these things, and at the time what was in those bags was pretty well all of Western medicine almost, because a doctor can carry that bag, go deliver a baby, go extract and do surgery right on a battlefield, right? Like take a bullet out of somebody. So then they said, good, they put another one beside that one. So he reached in front of him, yeah, it's here. They said, reach inside that one and describe everything that to everybody here. So he opened it up, reached in there, and you can hear different things, and you can smell the medicines in there. Or like the sweet grass. He knew what some of them were. He said this sweet grass and roots, different powders, like different smudges like this. And then even animal parts. There was a bear paw in there. You felt the claws. There's a bear paw in here. So so then what happened next was they said, okay, for as long as the sun shines, the grass grows and the waters fall. So basically they said, as long as the sun shines and gives everything life. Without the sun, there'll be no life. As long as the grass grows and gives life to the ones that we depend on for life, like the buffalo. The grass, buffalo eats the grass, right? Then they said the waters fall. When all female species, before the process that takes place before they bring life into the world. And you have to understand that the background to that is that's the power. That's the only thing that's considered powerful. Sure, men have all of these ceremonies that we can make and bring in these spirits and stuff like that. But that's not powerful. The only reason why those are done and why is accomplishable is because as men we're so pitiful. We're the most pitiful of all creatures. Everything that we do is because we're begging. When we pray, we're begging to feel sorry for us. That's why when people, they give tobacco to a man to say prayers for them, because that man is known because he's a good prayer, because he's pitiful, he's humble, and spirits listen to him because he knows he's a good beggar, basically. I see a lot of smiles. I always get that. And this power, though, is and the word of it, escoteo. Esqueo is the name for woman. Escoteo is the fire in our lodges. But you ever notice that lodge? It's like this, right? Like the teepee was a woman's design. Women wear skirts like that too, because they have this power that, they need to be respectful of their power. And women don't have to do the ceremonies that men do. Women don't have to do the sacrifices that men do, because all of these things, even our loud drums and our loud songs, it's just trying to get the attention of the spirits. It's almost like you're crying out to be heard when you're singing. It's that same voice that we use when we cry when we're little, that we use to be able to sing. And then the spirits feel bad for us and they come, they come to listen. The Great Spirit, we're never able to directly approach or talk to. We don't really pray to God. He sends helpers, what we call like skapeosak. Just like he has those helpers as well that do all the listening and for him and send the messages. Come hear the people. So all of those things, all of these things that we do, all these ceremonies, these big lodges and everything like that, they're just a glorified form of begging. And women, older women are very strict with the younger women to make sure that they don't do what men do. Honor yourself and don't do those pitiful things that men do. With those drums, with those singing, with those ceremonies, you don't run those. You don't. Today women do that too in Sundance. Though they do make the sacrifices though, which is it's perfectly okay. But a lot of times they don't have to do the suffering that men do. They don't have to do the piercing of the skin to rip the flesh in a Sundance, or give up food and water for 3 or 4 days during that Sundance. And some of the things that have been asked for in those Sundances are like I've seen people come in there and ask for like a guy will come in there and ask, I want my wife to be able to have children. They were told by the doctors that they'll never not be able to have children. And I've seen that happen in my own family where my brother did that, right? He was able to have a child with one of his partners that was told that same thing. But he gave up food and water for 4 days and went into that Sundance asking for that. So there is that, they could be seen as powerful, but it's not. It's just, we've been so pitiful that we asked and those were granted because we did enough suffering and gave enough stuff away. So, but the thing is that power is what we live to uphold as men, because we're expendable also, right? If we die fighting for that, the overall outcome is, our children are safe, the mothers are safe, and life will go on. So we live to uphold that power of bringing in life. So those are the original terms of our treaties. But Alexander Morris plagiarized it, but he avoided copyright by changing 10% by saying rivers flow. So, but it was the waters that fall. So they said, for as long as the sun shines, the grass grows, and the waters fall, you're to provide us, not us, Mi'kwa Aisinoak, the red people, with that first one. For as long as the sun shines, the grass grows, and the waters fall, Mi'kwa Aisinoak, the red people, need to be able to provide themselves with that second one. So we hear this story over the years and we don't really think about it. Okay, what does it mean? We as academics, critical thinking has been really a new thing that wasn't really taught, but it's being taught now. People are able to question, well, what does that mean that they're supposed to provide themselves with that one there. And this is in the treaties. This is how the medicine chest came about. So we need to be able to provide ourselves with those medicines. And that includes the animals. That includes all those plants and everything that was in that second bag. So long as Canadians want to live in all our land there that we see on the map. Because without these treaties, all Canadian citizens can't be here, because those treaties gave Canadian citizens permission to exist within our land. That's what was agreed to at the treaties. It wasn't a land surrender, because we seen the books. Like I know a lot of people might know about the books, like No Surrender, The Land Remains Indigenous, from Sheldon Krasowski. That's a very thorough written book about the evidence that he discovered regarding the treaty negotiations there, where land wasn't even discussed. There were the term, the surrender clause wasn't even presented. Alexander Morris, in his own handwriting, says, had we discussed land with the Indians, there'd be no treaties today. There's no safe approach to discuss land or to convince Indians to give up their land. So the medicine chest clause, it's something that Alexander Morris fought for against his superiors or his bosses. He argued them. And then they said, okay, fine. They made one sentence in the treaties that said, a medicine chest will be kept at in the house of the Indian agent or something like that, right? With no explanation of this information that I shared with you, this story of how that came to be out of these ceremonies. With the presence of Alexander Morris, who witnessed that. When they opened the door of that lodge there to let the light in again, all of those things that was in front of him weren't even there. It's like they just disappeared. They magically appeared in front of him, like where he couldn't see them, but they were there. But when they opened the door, there was no way somebody could have hid those and brought them in. It's very obvious like that. You can't provide that kind of that foolery. But that's the magic that happens in our ceremonies. Go ahead, Valerie.
Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, I certainly agree with you that the common perception among settlers is that reserve land is land that was set aside for hunting and ceremony and traditional practices and is perfectly adequate for that. And in an event that I attended recently, she explained that in Treaty 1 anyway, what was actually negotiated at the time is that reserve land was specifically for farming and for Indigenous people who were interested in taking up farming. And the understanding was that everything outside of that would continue to be used for hunting and ceremony and what have you. And I'm just curious if that's your understanding of Treaty 4 and 6 as well.
That's it is in a way, but also they weren't set up that way, right? A lot of the reserves that took place didn't come immediately after the treaties were entered into, right? They're completed. What was taking place where Indian agents were put into place, and they were using rations to lure people into establishing reserves. And the whole purpose of that was to deconstruct the nation structure of the Indigenous nations here, like Plains Cree. So the approach was made that, you're not going to get rations if you're not living on a reserve. So they set it up that, if you get a certain amount of followers, we'll recognize you as a chief. Then you'll get rations for all your followers, yourself and all your followers. and then also a reserve. So this is considered like a divide and conquer approach, where you divide a nation up, and then you know, they're so split up that in the future when they try to come together, it'll be almost nearly impossible for them to develop a united front in order to have a common argument and a common fight, especially in regards to land, right? So these chief and council systems are very similar to what Nazi Germany did and their practice of Judenrat councils. And I encourage people to look up Judenrat councils and explore the similarities that they have with the chief and council system that was imposed upon our people as well, because chief and council systems are not traditional governance. And in fact, when they came to Treaty 4 territory, the treaty party the treaty commissioner sent scouts to come and tell the people here to gather their chiefs at Fort Capel and to discuss treaty, right? And people over here were really offended by that. It was really it was almost as saying, you know, like we lack the we're very simply organized, where we only have chiefs, when our systems of governance were very complex. And you had so many different societies and leaders in those societies that were focused around spiritual things, ceremonies. Also, you had the women. And then you had all these leaders in there that did come together, though, but they never considered themselves as chiefs. So when Treaty 4 started, they just appointed spokespersons. And one of the things that they didn't do was, one of the things that those spokespersons were told to include was that red brick schoolhouse. That too is just like the medicine chest clause, came out of ceremony. And the only education, or the only things that were being taught in red bricked education buildings was college and university, right? In those days. That's why it was very specific to red brick schoolhouse, to learn the cunning of the white man. And that's what was said in those ceremonies, that they need to ask for that. The next thing is they need to ask for that 300,000 British pounds sterling that the Hudson's Bay Company sold our land for to the British Crown, and where the British Crown turned it into what was known as Rupert's Land. And then the next thing they were told was for the treaty commissioner to come back next year because we're not ready yet. There was no pipes. There was no pipe stem, no oskichi. That wasn't presented there because these were only spokesperson. The holy people, those ceremonial people, were actually watching from the hills there. We have ceremony that every September for those four headmen of those four main societies there that were watching on those hills, and they're brought into this ceremony every September. And but they didn't come back. The treaty commissioner never came back. So for years, the elders here have always maintained that, you know, Treaty 4 never began. It wasn't ceremonially opened, and it wasn't ceremonially closed. They're still waiting for the treaty commissioner to come back to negotiate Treaty 4. It never took place. Then, you know, a couple months later, they went and met with the Soto people in at Fort Elise, Manitoba, and then got their adhesion with Chief Pasqua. Chief Pasqua did pictographs, and none of his pictographs mentions land or giving up land as well. So just some interesting things like that, right? They, I know I kind of go off into into the deep end there, but I'm sure it's information that a lot of people never heard. And I do have PowerPoints for that. So anybody have any more questions?
Aaron, this is a really specific one, just going back to iHunter.
Yep.
I'm just curious, practically, if that is just oriented to public land or if private land is included there as well.
It's just public, like there's a Saskatchewan Wildlife and SWF lands, and then there's it marks out all the zones as well. So it's a convenient map for all hunters, and then also reserve lands. So there's also federal lands, provincial lands, you know, what's considered what's considered PFRA land.
Right.
So it's there's like a lot of TLE lands that are also mapped out on there. So the lands that reserves are buying and turning into reserve land as a result of their shortfall. When reserve lands, when they were first surveyed, where people got 1 square mile per family of 5, which is a really unfair system, considering our people were very starving, and for people to really have 5 children in their family was a very rare thing. So, but over the years, the population grew, and there was nothing to compensate for the growth in population on those reserves for all the families of 5. That there was actually, after the establishment of reserves, there was people that were having 12 children. Became a common thing, especially after Indian residential schools. It was this phenomena that nobody can explain why people were having this amount of children. So my dad comes from a family like that. My mushroom had 12 children, my cookup. So my mushroom John Tootoosis. So they it marks all of these lands on there. It's a really good thorough map, and I wish people can see it when my camera is just not picking it up. But oh, there we go. So I can zoom in, and then all the brown is reserve land. I kind of gotta like how they make it brown, hey? And there's the red, like these are the wildlife lands. So they're updated often too. So, and then you can also click on them, and then you'll actually get the description and everything like that. And some of these even go far as like that one there was fish and wildlife land, and also wildlife management zones. So those are all a part of that map, that app.
My husband, Ian McCurry, has joined us, and he has something that he wants to say. This is Aaron, and then the other people on the call, I think.
Yeah. So Aaron, your experience on PFRA lands is not surprising. It is, however, the case that in the lease that all the people who signed PFRA pasture leases agreed is there's unconditional access for the season following the cattle being leaving. It's a distinct lease from all other government leases. And so it does remain in the wildlife equivalence land between the grazing seasons.
Okay. So
it's partially accessible.
So it's kind of consistent with the parks then as well too, like
I would say that there's a difference between the letter of the law and the application periodically, in that conservation officers have I know done things that are outside of the letter of the law in restricting people in some of those.
Okay.
So but it is the case that in all the federal ones, the lease that was signed requires open access following November 1st or the last cattle being up.
Okay. Cool. See, it's things like that, that lead into misconceptions that are really really known, right? Like publicly. Like it just leads into the assumptions that, you know, it's
Mhm.
locked in a lease.
Yeah, I think it would be useful. The lease is a public document. You might want to just make sure that First Nations people have a copy of, so that they know what rights there are on those lands. And it is a distinct lease from all the other government leases because of the commitment they made with regard to hunting access.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I didn't know that. So a lot of people.
No, I think it's a pretty well kept secret for not by accident.
Yeah, no, for sure. Totally unintended, but no effort to explain.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Mhm. So land remains really, really central. And as farmers and ranchers and people who hold title to land, we know how much value we've been able to glean from land. And, you know, the Treaty Land Sharing Network is really going only so far as to say we have to at least share it as treaty intended. What is your notion about, so Cowasis, for example, is using TLE money to increase its farming and ranching obligations. Is there other things that farmers and ranchers could be doing, you know, in addition to signing up their land with the Treaty Land Sharing Network, you know, learning more about treaties and the stories that you've been sharing with us and that sort of thing?
So going back, I never got a chance to go into like a little history of like that I have that's personal within my family in regards to what, because our questions are so engaged in like, you know, okay, how do we move forward, right? Like now that things are no longer in place, like the permit system is no longer in place. But before the permit system was in place, we had this land and the whole perception that we have of the land in general, of being broken entirely solely by white pioneers is wrong. A lot of the first wave of settlers that came here and the understanding of our history from the Indigenous side is that they were so afraid of our people. And there were like the first of them around Poundmaker even were living in caves. They were hiding out, and people were coming across these little chimneys outside that they had that dug out and for their fires and stuff. And our people never wanted them, didn't want them to live like that. They felt bad for them. They took pity on them. So they took them out of there, and so and in the process there, they helped them, you know, make farms. They helped them make ranches. They helped them, you know, build fences and stuff. And then in the exchange of that process, the skills that were acquired in that sharing, you know, went both ways. So you had a bunch of Indian farmers that had homesteads. You had a bunch of, you know, the settlers that had theirs as well. And then you had Métis that came as a result of those relationships that were, you know, based on this concept that we have as Plains Cree people, Wahkotuin. Wahkotuin isn't just relationships. It means it's a whole philosophy. It's a law, actually, where we can take somebody that's different from us and only look at them as a fellow human being, that we can make them a part of us. And we'll just be people. We won't be Plains Cree. We won't be Indian. They won't be white people. We'll be just, you know, humans. Because we're taught this in ceremony, that those ceremonies aren't Indian ceremonies. Those are human ceremonies. And you can't tell one human that they don't have a right to be there. Everybody that comes and is drawn to these ceremonies is totally welcome to be there, and welcomed into that experience as well, into the Sundance even. Anybody can come to these things, but there's just things that you can't do, right? And everybody can ask, you know, can I walk here? Can I sit here? Can I, there's just different things, different places where you can't really be. You can't be everywhere there. Like, not even myself, I can't be in certain areas at that ceremony. But there's all those laws that we have to abide by. But we need to be respectful of that and be able to ask. But that relationship got so strong with my family. My great grandfather was named Oso Skiugup. He was the older brother of Chief Poundmaker. His son was John Tootoosis Sr., who was one of those first of the farmers of that time that had partnerships with non-Indigenous farmers off the reserve, which later, our people were later kicked out of our homesteads and allocated onto reserves. Métis people as well, they were kicked off for there. There's a lot of historical posters that went overseas advertising homes for the millions. Apply for a ready-made farm, get 160 acres for free. All of these posters, I have copies of those as well. But apply for a ready-made homes for millions. These posters say that. And a lot of those homesteads belonged to Indian people at one time, Métis people. We were all removed out of those and put onto reserve. And all the land that was broken, that was farmed, that was also just given away. And then we're allocated on reserves that were surveyed on basically undesirable land. A lot of the reserves you go to, like, Tootoosis, Sakame, Ochapois, Kakuistahau, all of those, the land that they have is mostly swampy. There's not much you can do with it. So when they do buy TLE land, they're gonna try their best to do something with it. But a lot of them are falling into the thing and just leasing it out and making just peanuts from the leases. It's not really feasible economically. So but over time and the introduction of that permit system broke my mushum, my great grandpa, and he had to give away those cattle. He did go to jail because he killed a cow. The Indian agent sent the cops to him, arrested him. He was put into jail for killing a cow to feed his own family. He was one that secretly gave away the cattle like that in that process. Today, that family outside of Cutknife, there's their last name Ramsey. They're multimillionaires because they're well known for their strong bloodlines of cows, and a lot of which came from my great grandpa. And we never ever seen anything like that. That family, we were so close back then because all of the exchanges that were made, right? Like hay and cattle and farming equipment and everything like that. We had all that, but permit system came and took that away when we tried to make something with the land there, with what we acquired. So a lot of the treaties too say, farming implements will be provided, but there's no record of that ever taking place because people already had that. But the permit system, when that came into effect, they limited our people to a peasant farming system, where they introduced and only provided the obsolete technology, farming technology, to teach our people the start of farming. But really they're doing that to give us the disadvantages and to kind of take us out of the agricultural sector altogether. So in that process, there was also this severalty policy where reserve lands were divided up into 40-acre plots which were farmable. And one Indian farmer couldn't farm more than 4 of those plots, which was 160 acres, which one white farmer was able to farm 160 acres or more. So, and then also the the introducing of the permit itself, right? Like, so all of these things, it ruled Indians out of the agricultural sector altogether. Had it not been for that, and this only came about because there was only 2 places in all of Canada where Indians were doing good farming and ranching, which was in the Battlefords Agency and the Bertle Agency in Manitoba. But what happened was that the result was that this policy took place right across Canada, was enforced on all Indians right across Canada, and lasted all into the 1970s, which our people had really no choice but to accept welfare, even though there was a lot of resistance to that. A lot of our people knew once they went on that, there was no going back. And that's a lot of history there. It's a really it's not a really good history. We learn about the Indian residential schools, but that was only one component of genocide in the whole Indian Act package. So every Indian Act amendment gave Indigenous peoples the disadvantage and gave white Canadians the advantage of the country, the economy, everything. So we didn't get all these disadvantages as a result of treaty, because our treaty relationship was really good. We knew what it was like before the Indian Act came into place, when we had those partnerships, when we had that Wahkotuan. One of those amendments targeted that Wahkotuan altogether, where it specifically states that the Indian agents have the power to remove white people living with Indians on reserves. And that's what broke our people. That's what separated our people. That's what separated our paths and kept us separate from each other. We were imprisoned on our reserves with the pass system as well. Couldn't leave. Couldn't even go to towns because the police were mandated to kick us out of the towns, right? So there's a lot of things there, and a lot of misconceptions, and tax dollars. People think all our programs and services come from tax dollars, but none of that has ever been. 146 years of the Indian Act, not one single tax dollar has ever paid for anything for us. But since 1750, the Indian Trust, which was established in 1750, when the British Crown said, well, we can't just take your resources and give you nothing for them. We'll put half of what we make on them and put it into trust. But John A. Macdonald took some of that money out of there and paid for the Canadian Pacific Railway. There's going to be a movie about that, actually. The guy that made the movie, The Pass System, has done the research component of his next project, which is looking at the appropriation of Indian monies from the Indian Trust to pay for Canadian stuff. So we paid and paid and paid and paid for this country to exist, but yet we remain the poorest people in Canada. So non-Indigenous peoples, you benefited from the Indian Act, not treaty. So we're far from that slogan that we are all treaty people. And moving forward, how do we move forward? How do we repair that relationship? We need to go back to what those treaties were. What was it that the Indian ancestors have said and spoke about at those treaties, when they said things like, there's enough land here for our peoples, both our peoples, to get rich off of, and we're willing to share that. But what came in between us was the Indian Act, which is still in place today, that ruined our relationship. So today we hardly have any, we don't have barely any ranchers or farmers today. that are actually making something off of what they're raising. My mom and dad have like, 20 head of horses, but they're not making money off them. They're just raising them. So a lot of people are just really not really making any money off of what they have going. Any comments, questions? I have this whole, all the Indian Act amendments here, and each one of them was just to give us more and more disadvantage. The permit system, Indian agents were specifically given police to enforce the Indian Act. Métis people, they used the Indian Act to remove Métis people from the treaties, which at one time, Métis people were part of treaties.
Thanks so much, Aaron.
For sure.
We're getting close to our closing time. I just put the idea into the chat that if, oh, there she is. I was wondering if Autumn might lead this little bit. So here she can.
So as a closing, we would like, sorry, I have it written down so I don't forget. Because it's such informative, it's such a great presentation from Aaron. We would like to go around again just to have everybody participate, is to tell us one thing that you knew before the session and was reinforced, and then what you learned in the session, what was some new information, and what you were going to share. So it's a three-parter. What you already knew, which was reinforced, what you was brand new to you, and what are you going to share after this session. So let's start off with Valerie.
Oh shoot, I didn't want to be free. Well, just the last thing that you said, Aaron, I think reinforces other things that I've read and heard in terms of the settler or European worldview of scarcity, which I think we're still very steeped in, juxtaposed with Indigenous worldviews of abundance in relation to land and there being more than enough to share. And if you think about the Robert Angelics of the world who have 200,000 and then some acres to themselves, if we were to alter our land tenure system dramatically, I still feel that there is more than enough for everyone. As far as things to share, there's just a lot of things that you mentioned that I want to follow up on. I'm curious to know more about what's happening at Tootoosis. I want to make sure that Sandra and John and you connect around Sage, and you mentioned elk, and I see that Tom is on the call here, and I hope that the two of you will connect about that too. And I was really struck by what you said about the waters falling and the kind of misinterpretation about rivers flowing. And maybe that was just too graphic for people, to kind of record it that way at the time. But I think that that's a really powerful way of understanding it. And that will definitely stick with me and be something that I talk about with others.
For sure, thank you.
Let's go on with Dixie. You could share with something that was reinforced, something you knew that was something was new that, or something you already knew that was reinforced today, something that you just learned, and something you're going to share.
Well, I knew quite a bit about the atrocities on the plains, having read James Doschuk's book, Clearing the Plains. That was a shaking revelation to me. I guess I didn't realize that the Indians on reserve were not even able to kill their own cows for their own food. Like, I did know they needed to have permission to go to town or to step off the reserve to sell their crops. I also believe that they were restricted to like very basic implements. They weren't able to buy implements that would have facilitated their farming the land, even to the extent that their neighbors had much better machinery, etc. What am I going to share? Well, I share quite often bits of how atrocious it was. I think from James Dastuck's books, the worst thing that I could remember was that there were provisions in shacks, and the Indian agent locked them up and had people starve right beside those shacks that contained the food that could have kept them alive. Like, to me, that was, still is, like one of the biggest shocks. And Aaron didn't mention that, but similar atrocities for sure. So I share where I can, but I find most people don't want to listen. It's bad news. But it does make me much more empathic to, like, for instance, in Swift Current, I actually own a few apartment buildings, and I have several people that are of Indian background renting my apartments, and I do let them away with things that I might not let other people away with, because I do have compassion for what they've come through. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dixie. And I will call on Nettie if you want to share.
Sure. I unfortunately missed a piece of it, but I'm glad it's recorded. I'll go back, Aaron, and put that middle piece back in, because I'm sure I missed some really important pieces. I mean, what was reinforced for me was the treaties, and how deep and how comprehensive and how rich that relationship could have been, and how it was truncated and undermined and trashed from our side. So that was just reinforced with how you talked. What was new to me was these posters that you showed, this piece you said at the end, that there were actually ready-made farms. That's not the sort of pioneer history we learn. The pioneer history we learn is that our ancestors came and they made these farms. They made this land productive, as they say. But so that's definitely a step out of the frame that we were taught. And what I will share, I once I've looked at the whole piece you shared again, is I think some of those wonderful images and ways of speaking that you gave us. So thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Next person will be Sandra Fuller, if you're there and you want to share. And John, sorry about that. Sorry about that. You are muted. If you could just unmute yourself.
Yep, here we go. I'd like to learn more about the difference between the treaties and the Indian Act. It was sort of highlighted, and it intrigues me that the two are quite different. I would also like to follow up on the difference in some of the things I've read. That the Métis and the Indians were one people. During the fur trade, they became one people. They lived together and worked together, and then they were divided. The Métis were persecuted further, or in addition, or whatever. But those are a couple of things I'm going to take with me anyway.
Well, for sure, there is a lot of differences. Like we haven't actually experienced what it's like to live as treaty Indians since the Indian Act came into the picture. So we haven't had a treaty right since since the beginning.
Awesome. Thank you for that information. What's also a note is that the Treaty 6 treaty was signed in 1876, the same year the Indian Act was established or implemented. So it was right back to back. Tom Harris, would you like to share with us?
Hi, sorry, I just got on late. I think we were out with the cows until now, and so I apologize that, but I did catch the last half hour, so very interesting to listen to Aaron there. One of the things, I guess back in the early 90s, I worked with an agency called the Saskatchewan Indian Agriculture Program, and I traveled to the 16 bands in southern Saskatchewan in the Fort Capel, File Hills area. So, and one of the things I did there was one of the first things I read was a book. I think it was called Lost Harvest. And I don't know if anybody's ever had the chance to read the book or not, but it talks a little bit about Indian agriculture. And one of the things that, Aaron said tonight was it reinforced what was said in that book, is that the First Nations, when they first started getting involved in the agriculture, were really successful. And when the Indian agencies saw that, they actually started, doing things to take away the successfulness of it, taking away the implements, the tools, and replacing them with less than adequate. So, and Aaron touched on that a little bit tonight. And I just said, yeah, I remember that. I remember reading that in the book. So that was quite interesting. I can't remember what else. One of the other things that I remember too is when we start talking about TLE and lands and things like that, is that I remember sitting down with some of my friends from the Piaplot Reserve and them showing me the original maps of the reserve and compared it to what was at that point in time, at the point in time in the early 90s. And it was incredible how much land was actually taken away over the point in time. So anyways, I'll leave it at that. So
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. I know the weather is pretty crazy. It must have been really busy for you, but thank you so much for coming on and still taking your time to join us. Emily, would you like to share?
Sure. Thanks so much, Aaron, for everything tonight. It was really wonderful to have you, and I'm excited that you are a hunter yourself and that you have these connections with schools and universities. I'm at the University of Regina. If there's anything that any way that we can work together on treaty land sharing network things through the U of R, I'm game for that. But also if there's a way that we can connect people more with SAGE in addition to what Sandra offered, or other things, like that would be really fantastic. Something that I had heard a little bit about before, but that you went into a lot more depth on, was the area of, I'm not sure if you called it neutral territory, or what word exactly you used there, but of the gap in the treaty map. So that was really interesting for me to hear again, and in more detail, and it makes me want to know even more. And one thing that I was thinking about and that I'd like to follow up on a little bit too is like this idea of the leases expiring and what nations are doing now with those lands. And I don't know if there's a way that, if there's some sort of role in some sort of way, I don't know. It seems like that's an opportunity, a new opportunity that didn't exist. And if there's a way that there's like relationships that can be built around that between rural and farming communities and nations, that would be really neat. And the other thing that I'll talk about, I guess, coming away from this, is this idea that Treaty 4 was never really ceremonially opened or closed, and that people are still waiting for the commissioner to come back. And that really signifies, I guess, for all treaties, like they're supposed to be renewed and ongoing and open to open to that process of renewal. But it really suggests that like there's unfinished business here, and that maybe there would be a way to go back to the original spirit and intent, I guess, if Canada would show up. Thanks.
I knew your name sounded so familiar, and I seen it, so I heard it, and like, but here you're just right across the road. Thanks, Emily.
And Mary, would you like to share?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Autumn. And thanks, Erin, for your time with us tonight and your sharing your wisdom. I guess I would agree with what Val said in terms of the new and reinforced was the sort of the horrors of really never really living as treaty people yet. What was new for me also was the gap space, or that neutral zone at the Great Sandhills. I'd like to know more about that too. I'm going to share a couple of things. The first with you. We have a land sharing event this summer planned for either July 5th or 6th at the Charterist pasture, which he believes it was a place of pound makers' time. So it's near Corrobert. And our hope for this land sharing event is that there are a lot of local Indigenous folks, actually Indigenous folks from all over the province that come to see this one. There's apparently a lot of evidence that pound makers spent significant time on this land. So, yes, it'd be wonderful if you and all of your relations could come. The thing though that's notice, and be in touch with any of us about that land sharing event, and we'd be happy to involve you in whatever way you would like. The last bit is, I think it's Wakotwin. No, how do I say all my relations?
Wakotwin.
Wakotwin.
Yeah,
but I think
you'd really say that's not saying all my relations though. It's just the philosophy of establishing relations, I guess, with people.
That's really what I would love.
Mm-hmm.
I love the idea of going forward in a good way. My question was specifically about land, and I think, we are Canada. We can advocate to the officials of Canada to say it is time's up. We have to do much better, much sooner. Like that, we can't wait for the politicians. We have to push the politicians. And I think an organization like the Treaty Land Sharing Network can be very compelling that way, because we've been able to identify ourselves as people who say, we're not going to put up with this anymore. Like this is enough. We're learning the truth, and now we want to act on that truth.
For sure.
Thank you for tonight.
Something like that's very powerful to hear. And this last picture that I have here, I think everybody went, right?
I believe Shade is left.
Oh, okay.
Shade, would you like to share?
Okay.
Yeah, I can share. I've attended one of Erin's myths and misconceptions events before, and the gaps, it was something new to me too, like the gaps in the territory. So that's something new that I would like to learn more about. Something that I like to share with people too is like the permit system, and how, we were given our treaties and we were supposed to be honored those treaties, with spirit and intent, but we were given the permit system and we weren't allowed to, live our lives the way treaty intended. So that's always something that I like to share with people, because a lot of people don't really know about the permit system and the pass system. So that's something I really like to share with people. And yeah, thanks again, Erin, for joining us tonight. I always love learning from you. You have always so much knowledge to share. So thank you so much.
You know, in one way, we're probably related to one another because my mom comes from Muscatine. She comes from the Crane family.
Oh, really? Who's your mom?
Diane.
Just curious. Diane Crane.
Crane, and she's the daughter of Bill Crane and Rose.
Okay. Honestly, there's
Charlie and Muriel were my auntie and uncle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a small world. That's crazy.
I used to spend my summers there. So.
Yeah, that's crazy. So my family is the Vandale family. I don't know if you know, like Ed Vandale. He was a counselor of Muscadet. Yeah, he's long passed away, but that's crazy. Yeah, it's a small world.
So this last picture I have here, this is taken from one of the circulated copies of the actual Treaty 6 document, or sorry, Treaty 4. And this is held in I think it's one of the big museums there in Edmonton. But in all the copies like this that were printed, there's a statement in here that's the only capitalized statement in all of the treaties to have and to hold. Those that own land or own properties know this statement, especially if you've signed a lease. This statement in the treaties makes these treaties not a land sale or a surrender. That this document was set up by Crown lawyers to be nothing other than a lease. Canada became the tenant, and the Queen was basically applying to be the head tenant. What we know of as treaties has been a big lie all along. Indigenous people remained the landlords, and they were seeking permission to do business here. Because by international law, British Crown was prevented from taking land from Indians, right? And this was their safeguard. This was their safety net by putting this statement here in its obvious sense, to have and to hold. And more exploration needs to be done on that. This is very new for a lot of people, including myself and including everybody. That this statement was there this whole time, capitalized. You can look that up. You can't have to have and to hold in a land sales agreement. You can't say that in any other agreement except a lease. So I just want to leave people with that. I do feel that I could do a much powerful session, using some of the materials that I got to really go over a lot of these things, a lot of these, what I've just highlighted here, where I've just touched the surface within this, hour, or, almost 2 hours now. But I hope I can come back someday. And I don't work summers, so I would like to attend that event.
Good.
Well, maybe I'll just take that as let's make it happen. July 5th or 6th, I'll let you know for sure. And we'll see you then. And yeah, I just want to thank everyone for joining us tonight, and for Shade and Autumn for putting this together. And of course, for Aaron for his work at putting together some key ideas for us to be working with and moving forward with. So thank you, everybody. Look forward to hearing from you again next time.